Well, hello again. I'm sorry that chapter 3 got cut off. I have learned now to put my phone into airplane mode so that phone calls don't come when I'm recording. So here we go. Here's the rest of chapter 3. Remember, the owl is talking to the dwarf, Trumpkin, and trying to explain why the kids are in Narnia. Son of Adam and daughter of Eve, eh? Said the dwarf. But people at Experiment House haven't heard of Adam and Eve, so Jill and Eustace couldn't answer this. But the dwarf didn't seem to notice. Well, my dears, he said, taking first one and then the other by the hand, and bowing his head a little. You are very heartily welcome. If the good king, my poor master, had not this very hour set sail for 7 Isles, he would have been glad of your coming. It would have brought back his youth to him for a moment. And now it is high time for supper. You shall tell me your business in full council tomorrow morning. Master Glimfeather, see that bedchambers and suitable clothes and all else are provided for these guests in the most honorable fashion. And, Glimfeather, in your ear—" Here the dwarf put his mouth close to the owl's head, and no doubt intended to whisper, but like other deaf people, he wasn't very good judge of his own voice, and both children heard him say, "See that they are properly washed." After that, the dwarf touched up his donkey and set it off toward the castle at something between a trot and a waddle. It was a very fat little beast, while the fawn, the owl, and the children followed at a rather slower pace. The sun had set, and the air was growing cool. When they went across the lawn, and then through an orchard, and so to the north gate of Cair Paravel, which stood wide open. Inside, they found a grassy courtyard. Lights were already showing from the windows of the great hall on their right, and from a more complicated mass of buildings straight ahead. Into these the owl led them, and there a most delightful person was called to look after Jill. She was not much taller than Jill herself, and a good deal slenderer, but obviously full-grown, graceful as a willow, and her hair was willowy too, and there seemed to be moss in it. She brought Jill to a round room in one of the turrets, where there was a little bath sunk in the floor, and a fire of sweet-smelling woods burning on the flat hearth, and a lamp hanging by a silver chain from the vaulted roof. The window looked west into the strange land of Narnia, and Jill saw the red remains of the sunset still glowing behind distant mountains. It made her long for more adventures and feel sure that this was only the beginning. When she had had her bath and brushed her hair and put on the clothes that had been laid out for her, they were the kind that not only felt nice, but looked nice and smelled nice and made nice sounds when you moved as well. She would have gone back to gaze out of that exciting window, but she was interrupted by a bang on the door. "Come in," said Jill, and in came Scrub, also bathed and splendidly dressed in Narnian clothes. But his face didn't look as if he were enjoying it. "Oh, here you are at last," he said crossly, flinging himself into a chair. "I've been trying to find you for ever so long." "Well, now you have," said Jill. "I say, Scrub, isn't it all simply too exciting and scrumptious for words?" She had forgotten all about the signs and the lost prince for the moment. "Oh, that's what you think, is it?" said Scrub, and then, after a pause, "I wish to goodness we'd never come." "Why on earth?" "I can't bear it," said Scrub, "seeing the king, Caspian, a doddering old man like that. It's frightful." "Why, what harm does it do you?" "Oh, you don't understand. Now that I come to think of it, you couldn't. I didn't tell you that this world has a different time from ours." "How do you mean?" "The time you spend here doesn't take up any of our time. Do you see? I mean, however long we spend here, we shall still get back to Experiment House at the moment we left it." "That won't be much fun." "Oh, dry up. Don't keep interrupting. And when you're back in England, in our world, you can't tell how much time is going here. It might be a number of years in Narnia while we're having 1 year at home. The Pevensies explained it all to me, but, like a fool, I forgot about it. And now, apparently, it's been about 70 years. Narnian years, since I was here last. Do you see now? And I come back and find Caspian an old, old man. Then the king was an old friend of yours? Said Jill. A horrid thought had struck her. I should jolly well think he was, said Scrub miserably, about as good a friend as a chap could have. And last time he was only a few years older than me. And to see that old man with a white beard, and to remember Caspian as he was in the morning we captured the Lone Islands, or in the fight with the sea serpent. Oh, it's frightful. It's worse than coming back and finding him dead. Oh, shut up, said Jill impatiently. It's far worse than you think. We've muffed the first sign. Of course, Scrub did not understand this. Then Jill told him about her conversation with Aslan, and the 4 signs, and the task of finding the lost prince, which had been laid upon them. So you see, she wound up, you did see an old friend, just as Aslan said, and you ought to have gone and spoken to him at once. And now you haven't, and everything is going wrong from the very beginning. But how was I to know, said Scrub. If you'd only listened to me when I tried to tell you, we'd be all right, said Jill. Yes, and if you hadn't played the fool on the edge of that cliff and jolly nearly murdered me. All right, I said murderer, and I'll say it again as often as I like, so keep your hair on. We'd have come together and both known what to do. I suppose he was the very first person you saw, said Jill. You must have been here hours before me. Are you sure you didn't see anyone else first? I was only here about a minute before you, said Scrub. He must have blown you quicker than me, making up for lost time, the time you lost. Don't be a perfect beast, Scrub, said Jill. Hello, what's that? It was the castle bell ringing for supper, and thus what looked like turning into a first-rate quarrel was happily cut short. Both had a good appetite by this time. Supper in the great hall of the castle was the most splendid thing either of them had ever seen. For though Eustace had been in that world before, he had spent his whole visit at sea, and knew nothing of the glory and courtesy of the Narnians at home in their own land. The banners hung from the roof, and each course came in with trumpeters and kettle drums. There were soups that would make your mouth water to think of, and the lovely fishes called pavenders, and venison, and peacocks, and pies, and ices, and jellies, and fruit, and nuts, and all manner of wines and fruit drinks. Even Eustace cheered up and admitted that it was something like. And when all the serious eating and drinking was over, a blind poet came forward and struck up the grand old tale of Prince Cor and Aravis and the horse Bree, which is called The Horse and His Boy, and tells of an adventure that happened in Narnia and Calormen and the lands between in the Golden Age when Peter was High King in Cair Paravel. I haven't time to tell it now, though it is well worth the hearing. When they were dragging themselves upstairs to bed, yawning their heads off, Jill said, I bet we sleep well tonight, for it has been a full day, which just shows how little anyone knows what is going to happen to them next. The end. And next we'll read chapter 4. It's called The Parliament of Owls.